If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another album review for you guys today. I'm feeling and sounding a little bit better today than I was yesterday when I recorded the Neoblivious Scars video, but still not quite all the way there yet, but I am getting there, don't you worry. I'm doing alright. But anyways, I'm here to talk about a bit of a surprise album for you guys. I am checking out the 9th studio offering from legendary Irish folk metal band Cruachan with The Living and the Dead. So yeah, this is my first time checking out Cruachan because I've heard this name come up in the broader circles of folk metal. But then again, with folk metal, it's kind of hit or miss for me. Some bands do it well, others I'm just not as into. But I wanted to check out Cruachan because not only from Ireland, and I'm pretty much half Irish, after all my last name, McIntyre, is an Irish last name, or at least it was an Irish last name, but yeah, I'm part Irish, do you not understand? I like to talk with the hard R. So, yeah, I can get away with that because I'm pretty much half Irish. But I digress. But Cruachan are always seen as like one of the pioneers of folk metal in general, kind of up there with Bathory when they transitioned into Hammerheart with the more folky approach, Skyclad over in England, and then Cruachan here in Ireland. So yeah, those would be, I think, the first three major folk metal bands, or bands that took folk and put it into metal. But with Cruachan, yeah, checking out this album, I will say I was pleasantly surprised. Pretty much, like, the top influences I hear on this album: Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Thin Lizzy. I would expect a Thin Lizzy influence, considering Thin Lizzy's still arguably to this day the greatest band to come out of Ireland. Rest in peace, Phil Lynott. But so it would make sense that they would incorporate a little bit of a Thin Lizzy influence, but yeah, there's just so much classic old school heavy metal on here, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest especially. And we kick things off with the first of two title tracks, The Living, which is almost like a power metal song. Well, it's an instrumental, but it feels like a power metal instrumental, but with the violins and fiddles and all that stuff on top. It was very epic. Then you go into The Queen, where immediately Iron Maiden gallops start flying into your ears, and it even gets into like a triplet gallop, which sometimes whenever I think of triplets, I often think death metal, but these triplet gallops that we get on the majority of these songs feel very Iron Maiden inspired, like Rime of the Ancient Mariner type gallops, or even like Alexander the Great like gallops. You know the Maiden gallop when you hear it, and it's pretty much all laced throughout this album. But yeah, in The Queen, and I love how the mood will shift from being epic to being somber a little bit. And the song even ends with like this evil, dirty tremolo riff that felt like Morbid Angel a little bit, like Altars of Madness era Morbid Angel. It's like they can just go old school death metal on a whim just like that, which was out of nowhere. Then you get to The Hawthorne, which begins with somber and beautiful violin and acoustic guitars, and it's fairly doomy for the most part. Like, it's very doom and gloom, and it's sad and dark sounding. But then you get the hefty guitars coming in, and they just pack a punch, and then it gets us into like a big epic gallop at the end, like as if we're taking back our freedom from tyranny or something like that. The Harvest begins with a big chugging riff that almost made me think of Modern Testament a little bit. And then the violins come back to provide more of a backdrop. It gets wonderfully triumphant, and then you get another triplet Maiden gallop flying once again, and it ends in a rather magical way in terms of like the riff work, the atmosphere, everything. The festival, which is another instrumental, and it's again a little more power metal inspired. Sweet gallop in the riff and the rhythms, but it has a little bit of a dirtier guitar tone to it, which I really, really liked. Then we get to The Ghost, which begins with more fiddles and then eventually gets into this big riff and progression that brings in the Judas Priest influence. And then sudden grooves start coming in. You even get like almost like a death metal chugging breakdown with little tremolo lines that kind of bring in a little more of the Morbid Angel vibe again. But then those tremolos suddenly turn into black metal tremolos, which, granted, Cruachan has always had a bit of a black metal vibe to their sound since the very beginning, from what I know. And you get some of that on The Ghost. And even a killer bass line at the end. The Crow is a little bit more suspenseful in tone in the beginning with the acoustics and violin, but then you get big riffs and grooves. And the chorus on this track is particularly noteworthy because it's so fucking catchy. More Judas Priest vibes come in, but then it turns into like a classic speed metal D beat. I was trying to combine both and create D metal. What the fuck am I talking about? But it gets into like a speed metal D beat stomp, which was really cool. The Reaper, gross bass line in the beginning that transitions into almost a death metal riff. And then you get this like triumphant chug, which I never thought I would say. But then it just suddenly shifts into a little bit of a doom section. And then you even get a cool, soft, somber section before you get this huge dynamic moment that just gives you a huge release with a big soaring guitar melody that just was like the cherry on top of a delicious banana split. The Children begins with this like dramatic guitar melody, and you even get banjo on this track, which was really, really nice to hear, kind of bringing in a little bit of that like almost bluegrass influence, or even like American folk influence into their Irish folk style. But yeah, the banjo and the violin work together to create somewhat of an adventurous mood. Then the return of the maiden triplet gallop is back. And then you get like cool vocal layering with the cleans and the black metal scream. But then suddenly out of nowhere, there's a riff on here that made me think of Lamb of God a little bit. I know that might sound crazy, but if you listen to this riff, you might understand it might have had a bit of a Lamb of God vibe to it. Then we get to the Changling, which begins again with more maiden gallops, rhythms, and riffs. Female vocals come in and do a great job duetting with the frontman Keith Fay, who I think's the only original member of the band still there. And then suddenly this big scream with a riff that's filled with impact. Then we get to The Witch. This is really where the Thin Lizzy vibes came out. Like, this track has a bit of a hard rock vibe to it, which was really cool with the riff work and the driving bass line. Definitely made me think of Thin Lizzy. And then one of the only songs where you get a guitar solo, and this solo was one of the big standout moments on the album for me. It just had great feel, but it showcased that I'm not sure if Keith is the lead player or he's just a rhythm player, but whoever's doing the solo here, they can fucking shred. And I absolutely loved that. And then you end with the second title track, The Dead. Dark and somber with the violins, but then it gets into black metal. Like, this is the most black metal oriented track. Like, the vocals are completely black metal. You do get a bit of a gallop here, but it's mostly tremolos and blast beats to kind of end off on a more haunting note. But yeah, like, vocally, this is mostly clean vocals. The tracks where you do get the occasional black metal vocal, apart from The Dead, like The Queen had a little bit of a black metal vocal approach. Let's see. The Reaper also brought that in a little bit, same with the Children and the Changeling and the Witch. So it was like the first half of the album was mostly clean vocally driven. Second half, you get more of the black metal vocals, but still the cleans were really the prominent thing when it came down to the vocal style on this album. But you get some great fucking catchy riffs on here that harken back to old school hard rock and metal with Thin Lizzy, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest. Occasional death metal moments, even gets a little bit kind of speed metal in spots, and then of course black metal here and there with some of the tremolo riffs, but especially on the final track, The Dead. The production on this album I thought was really nice, and the mix was fairly even. Like, the bass was audible pretty much throughout, and even the bass had their moments of like, let's showcase a killer bass line to really get things going or to end things off. And, like, the production, it's clean, but there's still enough grit to it where it doesn't sound overproduced. The way in which the folk instruments were done on here, sometimes it did take away from some of the riffs, but it does complement everything very well, all things considered. So, overall, like I said, I loved this album. This one caught me out of left field, because given this is my first time checking out a full album from Cruachan, I was expecting something cool, but not to this level. I am going to be bold. I'm going to give this album a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed this. I loved hearing a lot of them old school heavy metal tropes, but done in Cruachan's way, which it doesn't... It's like, you almost feel like you've heard a lot of these influences in the riff work before, but it doesn't feel derivative. It felt like something you would have heard a band like Cruachan be able to pull off, which makes it refreshing to hear. Kind of similar to modern Darkthrone, or even other bands that pay nods to classic heavy metal. But yeah, 9 out of 10 for Cruachan's The Living and the Dead. But of course, this is just my opinion. What did you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments below, but until next time, you people keep your horns high and your dreams wet.